How many of you love speaking the truth? How many know that it's hard sometimes? Ridiculously hard sometimes, especially in a culture that is so hostile to the truth. But that's why, my wife and I started this, because we understand that a lot of these conversations, a lot of these things where we need to inject ourselves are not easy, especially if you're on any college students in here or high school students. Not so easy. We speak in college campuses. It just blows my mind. I am not going to be one to disparage millennials. I think every generation has its issues. Every generation has rejected truth. Many folks in every generation. And I honestly think college students are incredibly courageous today, particularly pro-life students who endure a lot of persecution, even sometimes violence. In fact, I spoke at Columbia University a few months ago, and the pro-life group there was too afraid to actually even promote the event because of the post-election insanity that erupted. So kudos to a lot of courageous pro-life students, because it is not easy to be you. This is why I do what I do.
Planned Parenthood does not at all profit from fetal tissue donation.
Planned Parenthood has been involved in selling the body parts of the babies that they abort for decades now at this point.
Emotions do not set us free, people. Truth does. And I know sometimes we have to figure out how to say that. And as someone who creates messaging and tries to be a communicator, I know it's not an easy thing, but we have to figure out ways to connect with people. And don't give up after the third time or the fifth time or the 10th time. You figure out what might resonate. And what might resonate with one person doesn't always resonate with the next person at all. But I am a factivist. I love being a factivist. This strong-willed child knew that, honestly, I think testing my parents' limits, I know none of you younger folks ever test your parents' limits, but I know that was kind of training ground. My poor parents. They're stronger parents because of it, though, I will say that. But I love being able to try to take a truth that we may have heard, even 1,000 times, and trying to tweak it a little bit so that it has a slightly different revelation for people. And that's what I'm going to do today. The issue that I am very passionate about as a father of 4, 2 of whom are adopted. All 4 are homeschooled. We homeschool our kids, yes. And when I say we, I mean my wife, Bethany, homeschools them. She's a teacher by profession, and she taught for many years in all kinds of different schools, in public, private. Her last 3 years were in inner city Philly. And she says it was easier teaching in riot, lockdown, inner city Philly middle school than it is to homeschool sometimes. But any homeschooling parents in here? And any homeschool parents who have survived all the... Yes, there's hope. There's hope. Awesome. Well, I want to talk about things that are missing. So we'll start this way. I feel like on Sesame Street or something. The word is? Good. That was awesome. And if you drop something out of this, it becomes completely different. You drop out the R and it becomes fiend. Slightly different than friend, right? See, this is my problem. I keep wanting to walk away, and the table is in my way. Okay, the next one. Rote. How many of you ever learned that way? Rote memorization. Yes. They don't teach that anymore. They teach a lot of feelings now in school. Do you feel that that's correct? Anyway, so you take out one word, and it becomes... I said one word, one letter. Drop out one letter. Next one. The word is? Oh. Does anybody have that in here? Yeah, all right, just jump ahead of me. So here's the difference. It's amazing when you remove one thing from the picture, it changes the essence of everything. When you remove something from the natural order, it changes everything, particularly when you remove fathers. And that's what I want to talk to you today about. Fatherhood begins in the womb. This is actually one of our billboards that we placed. We did about 500 billboards in a number of different cities across the country. It's amazing. It doesn't matter what your pro-life messaging is. They're always denouncing you for being pro-life. Some people think, well, we just need to make it soft or gently. No, it doesn't matter what you say. They are always going to decry it, as was said earlier. I mean, we were denounced by the ACLU, by Planned Parenthood. Of course, you know if you're being denounced by groups like that, you're doing something right. But it doesn't matter what your messaging is, they will denounce you. And the reason why, as a father and as a couple, Bethany and I, through the Radiance Foundation, always highlight the importance of fathers is because, well, let's just do a little exercise in imagination right now. Just shut everything out. So for just a moment, imagine a world without fathers. Okay, exercise is over, because honestly, none of you would be here if there were no fathers. That's the truth. And this is, right here, being a father to these little munchkins, Justice, Haley, Makai, and Aaliyah. I'm telling you, I better understand God as a father. When my little girl Aaliyah was born, there was something so, because I wasn't able to see Haley born because I became her dad when she was 1, and I was able to adopt her when she was 5. But something just really struck me when Aaliyah was born. I remember holding her one night, and all of a sudden I thought, I understand the father heart of God. I understand a God who will go to all kinds of lengths to bring his children back to him. The self-sacrifice, that self-sacrificial love. Because I was sitting there holding her thinking, I would do anything for this little girl. I would do anything for, at that time I had 3 children. I would do anything. And there was this revelation in my mind, wow, I understand God a lot better. And so one of our foundational verses is Psalm 82:3. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. I had an awesome role model as a father. My favorite man on the entire planet is my dad. Phenomenal guy. He raised 13 teenagers. Sometimes people wonder, has anyone raised 13 teenagers, by the way, in this room? Because raising one could kill you, I'm just saying. But my dad and my mom raised 13 teenagers, loved us all like crazy. My dad, unfortunately, is actually struggling with Parkinson's, something that is running his family. And it always brings up those questions like, how is that even fair, God? My dad sacrificed and gave and gave and gave. But you know, the interesting thing is, this goes to the value of life throughout the whole spectrum. He still has incredible value. His value is not decreased. I love that my children still get to see Grampy and love Grampy, and Grampy, especially in the days where he's more lucid, gets to love them back. But this is part of a project that I'm working on a book for my dad. Just there's so many things. I mean, words are insufficient to thank such an amazing man. But you know, my father could have lived a normal life, but he chose to love and guide 3 biological and 10 adopted children instead. I mean, people will think, what is a normal life anyway? What is normal? I mean, and you don't have to adopt 10 children to have a life that's not so normal. You don't have to adopt 10 children to sacrifice, because every parent in here has sacrificed. Are any parents in here? By show of hands. Have you ever sacrificed for your child? Ever? Yeah, it's amazing how long it takes them to actually fully understand. One, fully understand that you actually are human, you have feelings, and that you know what they've been through. They think that it's all something so new. No, we've all been there before. But we sacrifice for them all the time. And it's a beautiful thing. And because of my dad's sacrifice and love, this family grew up loving each other. Well, actually, I should say first and foremost, we love God. And because we love God, the natural outflow of that is loving people. I had an awesome role model as a father. He was present, more than present. He was, I mean, imagine this, 13 kids going to all kinds of sporting events. We own a store, a department store. If you ever go to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, if you're ever in Pennsylvania, home of the Amish and all that, visit Bomberger store. But when we were growing up, everyone thought we were rich. We had next to no money. In fact, my dad made about $700 a month in the late 70s, and he had 6 children. And even though it was late 70s, $700 a month was poverty, just so you know. But it's amazing because there is always sacrifice. But here, on the other end, this is what pro-abortion activism, it has a particular flavor these days. It has a particular disconnect, I would say, with reality. So this is what ends up happening. This is what gets shouted out at us. No uterus, no say, right? If you're a guy, why should you be speaking? Shut up. But funny, That whole decision that brought us, 57 million plus casualties via abortion was brought to us by 7 men. But guys are always told to shut their mouths. Now, I don't know about you, I'm not the kind of person who actually likes to shut up at all. But there's something guys are still 50% responsible for the biological equation. And 100% have the right to speak about the human injustice of our day. And so don't let that I call it faux feminism because it's not real feminism. Even Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in their, what they call it, the Rebellion, they had their periodical, and they called abortion, quote, child murder. I mean, they weren't saying it was murder because it was illegal to have an abortion. They called abortion child murder. They understood that. They were true feminists. Today's feminism, unfortunately, pales in comparison. But here's the reality. Today's faux feminism wants discord, but yet life demands harmony. I mean, everywhere we look around, things have to work in harmony. Look throughout nature. That's why we as human beings also need to work in harmony in the natural order of things. There is a woman and a man, and guess what? They procreate. And guess what? They should be responsible for the children that they procreate. And here, there's an article from the New York Times that I found so interesting, because I love when people who, their whole field is science, and then they absolutely deny science. This is the New York Times. Of course, it's all the lies that are fit to print. What did they say? All the news that's fit to print? The New York Times had this opinion, this is several years ago, but it says men who needs them. And so in this article, this professor of biological sciences goes on to talk about how men aren't necessary at all. In fact, he says, we all started out as an egg. Like, not scientifically. We all started off at the fusion of egg and sperm. That's how we started out. But then he goes on to say, and the sperm really is just, it's really not that significant. It only has an infinitesimally small amount of information, DNA. I'm like, what? You teach science at Boise State University. It's crazy, but this is what passes for science today. So in this article, he goes on to talk about how men really are insignificant, that we're just not needed. But yet that is the mentality of this culture, that we're not needed. Now, I will say that there are some men who really do step up. There's some guys who actually step up and act like men, who embrace the responsibility when they've created a child. But there are a lot of men who just have exited. We have a massive exodus. So that's what Roe v. Wade did. Roe v. Wade didn't empower women, as they always say, particularly faux feminists. It didn't empower women. It empowered men to have sex and run. Why stick around when you can pay a few $100s or up to, thousands of dollars for an abortion and just be done with it and go on your merry way? Why? Why stick around? So that's why we have an epidemic of abortion, particularly in fatherless communities. This number right here, 85%. And actually, it's still the same. I don't know why it says 2009, but that's actually the more recent one, which is 2014. So 85% of all abortions among women are among unmarried women. We have a picture without fathers. There's something missing. 85%. And I will say this too, because for those who may know someone who is post-abortive, we kind of think, oh, post-abortive woman, she's the only one who's impacted. Men are too. And for those of you who need some national resources, I just want to give you this. We have a list of great post-abortive resources for women and men. If you go to theradiancefoundation.org/heal, we just happen to believe in wholeness and healing, but it is because of this exodus. What ends up happening is when men are taken out of the picture, families become more vulnerable, communities become more vulnerable, and guess who understands this? The abortion industry. In fact, every predator understands that. Predators don't attack areas of strength. They attack what they know to be weak. And when you have a family that's made more vulnerable because a father's out of the picture, and I actually have to stop for just a moment. I'm not just talking about any father. I'm talking about a father who's loving, who's committed, who's present, who's involved, not just a body that's there. Because there are some situations where, unfortunately, a guy didn't understand what it meant to be a father. But when we have fatherless communities, Planned Parenthood loves that. And there is no community more fatherless, more vulnerable statistically than the Black community.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. To lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood, now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about that. Black Lives Matter. And why do Black Lives matter? Because every human life matters. And yes, I will say hashtag all lives matter. More Black babies are aborted than born alive because that community suffers from a fatherlessness rate of about 72.3%. When my wife and I started the Radiance Foundation, one of the first thing we did as a newbie 501c3 is we launched a campaign about abortion's disproportionate impact in the Black community. And literally, this is the reality, not just in Black communities, but across America. Abortion and poverty have taken the place of fathers. It's devastating, especially when you think that this is a solvable issue. These issues are solvable. They're approachable. That's why one of the things we like to do is try to encourage and mentor young men. And we encourage others, take a little time out and spend time with a young man and mentor him and train him. There are a lot of folks who don't have fathers in the home to teach them. And we as fathers, and maybe you're not a father or a single guy, if you have the time, I really encourage you, pour it into a young man to help him understand what it means to be a man. Just by the numbers, just so you understand, when I talk about poverty taking the place of fathers, marriage is often just discarded today in our culture. Why bother? It's just some sort of archaic institution, right? Marriage is one of the best weapons against poverty, actually. When you look at it economically, a married couple, intact married family, husband and wife, can't believe I actually have to define it that way, but husband and wife, $87,000, that's their median income, versus $44,000 for a male head of house, single parent, and a female-led head of house, $29,000. So if you look percent below poverty line, 6.2% of intact married families, 15.7% in male head of house, 30.6% single female-led homes. This is not to disparage single females, because there are a lot of single moms who do everything they can and do an amazing job of raising their children. My wife was a single mom for a year. But like I said earlier, women were never meant to be both mother and father. But look at this. Single female-led homes, 5 times the rate under the poverty line than intact married families. So children who grow up in single female-led homes are 5 times more likely to grow up in poverty. And yet we want to discount marriage as if it's nothing. Planned Parenthood discounted marriage a long time ago through Margaret Sanger. In fact, Margaret Sanger had this periodical called The Woman Rebel. No gods, no masters was kind of like the tagline. And she was her own god, little g. This is what she had to say about marriage, printed in her periodical. She said, marriage is the most degenerative influence in the social order. No. It's the strongest influence in the social order. Because what it is, it's a reflection of harmony. It's a reflection of the union created by God in a natural order. And from that natural order flows order. And when it breaks down, what flows from it then? Chaos and disorder. Now, Cecile Richards, who, of course, they honor Margaret Sanger. They celebrate her every year. She continues this whole notion that somehow families can be redefined. And it's interesting because Planned Parenthood doesn't actually promote any form of marriage. And I'm not going to go into the politics of LGBT, this and that, but it's interesting. They do not promote marriage at all, except for one form of marriage. Gay marriage. It's the only form that they promote. It's interesting. They never center on fathers. In fact, if you look at their annual reports, they don't talk about all the parenting classes that they've given. I mean, your annual report about the things, the services that you're boasting about, the things that you're most proud about. Of course, what is their leading service, quote unquote? At least by income. Perhaps not by total numbers, but by income. Abortion brings in 80% of their revenue. And the way that revenue keeps coming in, 80% of all their health service revenue comes from abortion. How does that keep coming in? By targeting vulnerable communities, by targeting the poor black community, by targeting colleges. They know exactly where they're setting up. They are now also involved in a lot of school-based healthcare clinics. Thanks to Obamacare, it expanded school-based health clinics to where they also, through the law, which is amazing, when you have a 1,000-page law, it's easy to hide all kinds of things in it. But those centers are also deemed to be autonomous, so that the school has no control over those centers. And then who runs these centers? In many cases, Planned Parenthood or a very pro-abortion source. My wife taught in inner city Philly, and every Tuesday they had what was called Sex Tuesday. Planned Parenthood would come in, and she, as the teacher, had to sit aside while Planned Parenthood spewed all their propaganda for 45 minutes. Then once they left, she'd shut the door and have to deprogram her kids. Because what her kids, the last thing her kids needed, which they're mostly Hispanic and black students, the last thing they needed was horrible advice that would just continue the perpetual poverty, the generational poverty. They didn't need that. So this is why, Planned Parenthood, this was a meme they shared on Twitter, and it kind of blows my mind. I mean, you're talking about abortion, okay? You're talking about what they call a deeply personal decision between a woman and her doctor, but apparently, it's actually a lot of fun to talk about abortion. So this is Cecile Richards, pictured here, by the way, with their main demographic. Hashtag We Need Roe, Planned Parenthood generation. It's interesting. Planned Parenthood generation, they're only here because they weren't aborted. Funny how that works. Smile, you weren't aborted. So, okay, I probably should preface this a little bit. I just want to give you an understanding of sometimes the subtlety of their propaganda. This is a spot that they recently released. We are Planned Parenthood. Just see if anything in there just kind of makes you go, huh? What?
These are the doors to Planned Parenthood. What we do isn't a secret. It's quality health care for women, men, and young people. STI testing, well-woman exams, birth control, sexual assault consultations, and safe, legal abortion. From the clinicians to physicians, from the medical assistants to front office specialists to you, the people we serve. We are all Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood takes care of all of us.
Okay, did you have that what? There are a lot of moments throughout the whole thing. I mean, what we do here is not a secret. That's why you fight against every single bill for inspections, clinic standards, to match other ambulatory facilities. Okay, what we do here is not a secret. Okay. But at the end, anybody wonder, what? How old was that child? How old would you say the child was? 18 months, maybe up to 2 years. Now, unless they meant it in like a mafia sort of way, yeah, we take care of all of you. What in the world are they talking about? They don't provide pediatric care. We take care of, what? They barely provide prenatal care. If abortion, which is a lie, is only 3% of their services, then that would mean prenatal care, when you look at the total number of services they provide, is less than 0.1% of their services. Pediatric care is 0% of their services, but somehow, let's throw a near 2-year-old in there and we take care of all of you. This is what they do. Interesting too, Planned Parenthood, parenthood being their name, they never mention mothers and fathers in this spot. And in fact, in last year's annual report, you will never see the word mom, dad, mothers, fathers whatsoever, or any form of it. The only time you see parent is in the word parenthood. But you will see abortion 30 times. They understand what they're creating. Now, in their latest report, the latest annual report, they actually do feature a story of a mother. But it's interesting because they avoid everything they do all they can to avoid talking about fatherhood. Because in order to talk about fatherhood, you actually have to then talk about family. And they don't want to do that. Now, one of the other billboards we place, because we believe that fathers are there for protection. And it's amazing because when a father's out of the picture, there are so many things that happen. Higher dropouts from school, less economic opportunity, higher rates of violence, higher rates of drug usage. I mean, you take one thing out of that picture, and guess what happens? A whole lot of other stuff fills in that void. We put these billboards also around the Virginia Beach area talking about fatherhood. And it's interesting because I don't know if you guys have noticed it all in mainstream media. Has anyone noticed that there are stories about race or at all? Have you noticed it? I mean, it's kind of hard to catch those articles because they're so few and far between every other second. We, our culture, so fixated with race. And this started, I write a lot about issues of race and racial reconciliation. As someone who's biracial, I firmly believe that part of what I do is to try to bring racial reconciliation and get us out of this whole mindset that we should actually classify ourselves by the pigmentation of our skin. But one of the articles that I wrote when this all happened way back when, Ferguson and mainstream media malfeasance. And I talked about fatherlessness, because what the news articles never talk about is why are the communities in the situations that they're in? And they want to blame racism. And that's not to say racism doesn't exist. As long as humankind exists, greed will exist. Racism will exist. Sexism will exist. Elitism will exist, yes. But it is the easy scapegoat. And so I write a lot about these issues in the context of what's happening. You know, they talk about racism. You know, they didn't have enough black people on their city council. Well, they also had less than 5% of the black population vote at that time in that election. You know, we can't blame racism for everything. There are times when there truly is racial injustice, but unfortunately what ends up happening with all these media stories is that everything is racism. And so it makes it all meaningless. So I put this in the context, because you brought up, about Black Lives Matter. Yes, they do matter. But how interesting that this political movement, Black Lives Matter, announced solidarity last summer with the abortion industry. So how do you have all these leaders of these, somehow connected groups, of Black Lives Matter groups, announce solidarity with the leading killer of Black lives? I mean, let me just ask you, give me some names of black individuals who have been killed by police. Just give me a name. Well, that was way back, yes. Freddie Gray, yeah. How about in Ferguson? What sparked Ferguson? Well, he wasn't killed by police, but by George Zimmerman, yes. But we got Michael Brown. I mean, we got Philando Castile. If you're on Facebook, it almost seems like, oh my gosh, a black person being killed every single day by police. And it's a lie. Do you know how many black individuals were killed by police? This is according to a database 2015 from the Washington Post. Can anybody throw me a number? How many black individuals were killed by police in that year? In the U.S., how many black individuals were killed by police? It seems like we were seeing these articles every single day, right? I mean, oh my word, it's all over the place. It's epidemic, which is basically what's been said by mainstream media. How many in a year? 258. Now tell me a name of a white individual that was killed by police. Because mainstream media has an objective, and is to create this false racial narrative. 494 white individuals were killed by police in the same year. 490, twice as many, yes. And here's the point. 79% of all of those individuals were armed with a deadly weapon. And it's not, I think any loss of life is tragic. I'm not diminishing that whatsoever. But we get this, liberal mainstream media that is always, they're always anti-war, it seems, except when it comes to a race war. When it comes to creating this false racial narrative, they're all about it. Let me put this into context with an organization, with a political movement that has announced solidarity with the abortion movement. Just by the numbers. Remember I said 258 were killed in 1 year by police. Okay? In 1 day, Planned Parenthood kills more than police have killed in an entire year. Unarmed Black lives. But yet somehow we have a mainstream media organization that is hell-bent on creating this false scenario, this false reality that somehow, literally there are some leading preachers, I won't mention their names, I guess I won't call them out, or maybe I will. No, I won't call them out, but embracing the Black Lives Matter movement and talking about how, if I were black, I'd be scared to go walk out in the street. I think if I have the percentage right, it's 0.0000001% of the black population has been killed by police. And that's not to say we don't hold police accountable. Absolutely we do. But my word, we have to put this stuff into perspective. And now when we launched these campaigns, I couldn't understand why one of the organizations that I thought would actually be on the leading edge of this, because they have worked so long in the black community and trying to better situations, an organization that I grew up revering, the NAACP. I was trying to understand, well, wait a minute, what? They don't even talk about fathers. They don't talk about fatherlessness. In fact, up until 2 years ago, if you Googled fathers in NAACP, this is the only thing that came up. You could get your father a gift membership to the NAACP if you had a father. Remember I mentioned the whole 72.3% of children are born into homes without fathers in the black community. So I couldn't understand that, and I thought, well, okay, how about the National Urban League? So I went through their state of the state of Black America, which I have a whole other issue with that, but we're one America. But this publication is called Redeem the Dream. So I thought, you know what? They talk about all the social ills in the black community. Surely the National Urban League is going to address fatherlessness. So I open it up and I go through it, and you see prison mentioned 33 times, school to prison pipeline mentioned 6 times, voting mentioned 86 times, jobs mentioned 93 times, poverty mentioned 60 times. Do you know how many times fathers were mentioned? 0. 0. How is that even possible? Ignoring the obvious. And so when it comes down to it, as a father who had a great father, and I know some people didn't have a great father, and you still were strong or still are being strong right now. But there are certain roles that fathers play, and this for me, I don't care how much re-engineering people want to do today, but some shoes can only be filled by fathers. That's the truth. We hear all the time about entitlement programs, and I'm all about our safety nets, helping people on a temporary basis to help them rise above. Absolutely. But you know who are the original safety nets? Fathers. You know who's a really poor safety net? Or what is a poor safety net? Government. Government is a horrible substitute for a father. And yet they have injected themselves into this redefined family over the past few decades, and it has not made anything better. it has made things worse because government can never be a father. And a mother should never have to be both mother and father. And so I was so surprised because a lot of times you don't see corporate advertisers address this much. And there are some great resources, by the way, if you go to fathers.com or fatherhoodinitiative.com, great resources. But you don't often see major companies talking about fatherhood or being pro-life. So I was shocked when I saw this particular ad. And for me, it embodied exactly what fatherhood is. Fatherhood is sacrifice. It's a lot of self-sacrifice. And to see this, I think this is actually one of the most beautiful pro-life ads I've ever seen. It's called Graduation.
More coffee?
Yeah, thanks. Oh yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I can just quit school and get a job.
It's okay. Daddy's here. Daddy!
Hey.
Hi.
Hey, buddy.
I think we can do this.
Really? Adam Bailey. Adam Bailey.
That's awesome. I almost want to invest my money. Let them invest my money. But I actually have to have money for them to invest. But what a beautiful pro-life ad. It really tells the story of what a father should do. Self-sacrifice. Moms self-sacrifice all the time. And when the two work in tandem, there is harmony, and that is the best situation for our society because our society is strengthened. Every community is strengthened by intact marriages. So I'm going to take a few minutes because we have, a few minutes left. If you have any questions, I will try to answer your questions about anything that I've said or perhaps something that I've not said or just a comment. The young lady right here. Laura talked about how grandparents are impacted by Planned Parenthood stealing away their grandchildren, having no say, having no power to stop that violence. Being here one day and then gone. It is powerful. Right here, Tyler, right? Well, one, we have to engage in conversations. That's crucial. We have to form relationships. That's key. I mean, we have to have friends who don't look like us. That's part of it. But don't ever feel like, we live in a culture right now that discounts whiteness, which is just so insane. Like, you can't speak to this issue. Look, I don't have to be a battered wife. I'm a man. I've never been a battered wife, but I can speak out against domestic violence. Do you know what I mean? So I encourage people to get in conversations, whether in social media, and invite people into conversations. I think too often people want to battle. You don't want to battle, but engage in conversations. And here's something that you can do. I think one of the most pro-life things that we can do, particularly if you're a young person and you're not married yet, is be a mentor. Get involved in Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Get involved in someone's life that is written off as they're not going to amount to anything. They're hopeless. And get involved and pour your life into theirs. And there's a connection as well. So that's something you can do. I was a mentor for years and years, so I'm huge on mentoring others. But we cannot be afraid to engage in the conversations or to seek out relationships so that we can have these healthy and constructive dialogue. Here. Right. There are a lot of people who don't vote their conscience when it comes to election time, which is interesting because you know what? Human beings we just love contradiction. We love saying one thing and doing the other. All the time. I mean, the cognitive dissonance, I mean, oftentimes we'll say we believe something, but then we will act completely differently. And whether it's voting or anything else, this is kind of what we do. And, you know, our conscience is trying to scream at us and say, wait, that doesn't match up. Shut up. And it's tragic because, unfortunately, it has serious, tragic consequences. You know, how many Christians say that they're pro-life and yet have no... And then contort themselves rhetorically and ideologically somehow to support a candidate who's so radically pro-abortion. I will say this. I wrote articles about, you know, liberal evangelicals, for instance, supporting Hillary Clinton and saying somehow she was more pro-life than her candidate. I'm like, what kind of mental acrobatics do you have to go through to make that kind of statement? So there is that disconnect. There is that dissonance that happens. And unfortunately, we just have to keep encouraging people, look, vote your conscience and explain to them, here are the consequences. So a lot of people, they're so far removed from what abortion is, most of us don't ever look at the images. We should actually look at them maybe more often than we do to remind ourselves, to have our soul shaken by this is what we're talking about. But a lot of people just avoid that. Right. Oh, great point right there. She said, you know, our religious codes, you know, because speaking at a conference, talking about how we need to change our religious beliefs to match up with pro-abortion ideology. I mean, it is a scary thing. But see, as human beings, we come up with all kinds of crazy excuses. I mean, just in order to justify our unwillingness to act, or our position that we clearly know is not in line with truth, we make up all kinds of lies. You had a question here. At radiance.life. Okay. I'm just saying that's one of many sources. You know, obviously, Oregon Right to Life. What we do through radiance.life is every statistic that I ever give, all of the articles, if you go to radiance.life/news, you'll see all the news articles. They're all the statistics are linked to the primary sources. So, for instance, if I'm talking about, you know, number of homicides in the black community, I will link to the FBI reports. If I'm talking about abortions, I will link to the CDC. So we link to primary sources. We actually don't link to other pro-life organizations because we want to link you to the direct data so that you can come to a reasoned conclusion. The internet has made things a lot easier to actually be able to access the truth, but that also means there's a heck of a lot more clutter. Especially like a lot of the cat videos you have to get through in order, you all get distracted. Don't pretend you don't get distracted. Like you find out, wait, 20 minutes ago I was trying to find, and you just realize you just wasted your last 20 minutes on YouTube. Anyway, so in the back. Well, you know what? And thank you for being strong. Because, as I say all the time, I think women are the strongest stuff on earth. I mean, guys, we're awesome. We are, but we don't give birth. And so that right there sets women apart. But perhaps there are programs, I know where we live, there are mentoring programs where kids can spend time with a mentor. There are also programs it's almost like a big brother, big sister sort of thing. I don't know I'm not assuming everyone in here is a Christian, but there are programs in church as well to just have a male role model. I think that's important for young children. Not even just young children, for teens as well. So maybe there's an avenue there where they can get connected to positive male role models. That's the thing I would suggest more. And maybe since, you know, there are a lot of folks who live in this community, if anybody knows of programs like that you can share that with her.
Big Brother, yeah.
Big Brothers. Of course, there's also a waiting. There's a waiting list there too. So in the meantime, there may be churches or other parachurch organizations that can fill that role. I know in our area too, Salvation Army runs a program like that. So I just think it's important just to give that little time, because I know you do all you can do.